Live from Washington, D.C., it's The Larry King Show. The Larry King Show features interviews with interesting guests from around the world and telephone calls from across North America. It's a presentation of the Mutual Broadcasting System. And now, the host of the program, here's Larry.
Thanks very much, Paul. Welcome back to hour number 2 of The Larry King Show. In this hour, our guest is Sam Giancana, a recent guest with us on Larry King Live on television. He is the nephew of the famed mob boss, Sam Giancana, and he and his father, Chuck, have co-written Double Cross, the explosive inside story of Sam Giancana. Sam Giancana, the program brought to you in part by Bayer. Bayer is the wonder drug that works wonders. Why'd you write this book? Why'd you write about your uncle?
Well, obviously, over the years, we've accumulated a lot of information about my uncle, and we felt it was important to get as much information out to the public as possible so that the American public can lay at rest some of the issues that he's been associated with and that we've all grappled with for many years. So, in essence, we wanted to set the record straight, and hopefully with that, we can lay those things to rest and look to the future.
Did you grow up in Chicago?
Yes, I did. Was
that a plus or minus name to grow up with in Chicago? The exact name of your uncle?
Well, it certainly provided some unique opportunities.
You didn't get traffic tickets?
Well, at a very young age, I became the brunt of a lot of childhood games, children playing, the old I can't play with you because you're a gangster and so forth. But certainly people wanted to be near you because you had those kind of associations as well. So it had its pluses and minuses, but more than anything, it had its minuses.
Was your father involved with the mob?
Well, from an outsider standpoint, he certainly was. I mean, from the time he was a young man, he did errands and did deliveries for his brother. He worked in various capacities for his brother, ran, at that time, illegal pinball games and punch boards, and then eventually managing a motel that was owned by my uncle. So over the years, without question, he was associated.
When did your uncle die?
He actually died in June of 1975. Murdered.
Murdered where? In Chicago?
In Chicago, in the basement of his home, on the very day that federal agents came to arrange his departure for testimony in Washington to the Senate Committee on Assassination.
Has that murder been solved?
No, it hasn't. It's been rumored that it was a gangland slaying. He was shot 7 times in the head and was pretty much, has remained unresolved.
How old were you at the time?
Well, when he was murdered, that would put me at approximately 21. So I was in college. I was at Marquette University at the time.
You were his godchild?
Yes.
Were you close?
Well, certainly at a young age, I saw him often, and close is perhaps a little simplistic way to put it. There was a relationship there, but
was
at the
he a
same
loving
time,
uncle?
He wasn't. He was the kind of man who was more intimidating than he was loving. He was the type of man who wasn't really satisfied until he either made you cry or made you afraid. And he used that intimidation not only on children, but adults as well. So my recollections of him is really more out of one of fear.
At his height, how big was he in the crime circle?
Well, experts have mentioned in numerous times that he was the most powerful man, let's say in 1960, in organized crime. That Chicago controlled everything from Chicago, from the Mississippi River all the way to the Pacific. And with that, he had considerable influence throughout the country and obviously had networks around the world.
Now, the revelations in the book concerning JFK and others come to you how?
It's an accumulation of conversations my father had with his brother specifically, as well as information my father obtained through talking to other mob associates, specifically many of Sam Giancana's most trusted assassins. Likewise, information garnered through just being on the inside, hearing what people are talking about.
And this passed on to you, and you and your father sat down and decided to write it.
Yes.
Did you have any qualms about people alive now who might still be associated?
Certainly. We were concerned that we would be stepping on some toes, but we really came to the conclusion that the information we had was too important, that we really needed to go forward, and we had an obligation and a responsibility to kind of take this off our shoulders and give it to the American people, and we feel that other people would have done the same thing, that with this information perhaps it would remove the stigma and the associations that we had.
In a minute, we'll talk about some of the things that are revealed in this book. Fascinating. It's number 6 on the New York Times this Sunday. Written by our guest Sam and his father Chuck Giancana. Double Cross, the explosive inside story of the mobster who controlled America. And we'll ask about why that title, too, right after these messages.
You're listening to The Larry King Show, live from Washington, D.C. Here again, Larry King.
Sam Giancana is the subject of Double Cross. Why that title?
Well, as the name implies, Sam Giancana felt that he was double-crossed by Jack Kennedy and his father Joseph Kennedy in a promise that was made to him in 1956.
Which was?
The promise was that for getting a contract removed on Joe Kennedy's life, which was put out by Frank Costello in New York because Joseph Kennedy wouldn't participate in some local dealings, that Sam would remove the contract and as a result would be able to have the president's ear. And with that, Sam Giancana worked hard to participate in the election of Jack Kennedy, because obviously having a man in the White House that you can speak to and was an influential position.
And worked hard by doing what?
Well, it was a combination of not only financial contributions, but likewise helping muster individuals to get the vote out. Specifically, a lot has been documented in the West Virginia primary, where Jack Kennedy was going to really go into the first heavy Union state. This was at a time when the Kennedy brothers had made their name substantially on quite extensively, I should say, on the McClellan Committee, which was looking at the Teamsters Union, which was occurring in the late 50s. So between that, he was exuding a lot of assistance.
Did Sam ever attempt, to your knowledge, to contact John Kennedy and ask him to remember the deal, lay off?
Well, specifically, we say in the book that Sam Giancana went to the White House, to the Oval Office, just after Jack Kennedy took office. And this was really after several meetings that occurred during the primaries. But once Bobby Kennedy was appointed Attorney General in December, prior to inauguration in 1961, Sam Giancana went after the inauguration and said, what's going on here? And at that time, Jack Kennedy started to forward FBI documents through Judith Exner, which was really telling Sam, what was going on around him with FBI activity. But what Jack Kennedy didn't include was information relative to surveillance as well as electronic bugging. So it was really an effort to placate Sam.
And so they had a communal touch with each other through Exner.
Yes.
Who was kind of the delivery woman.
Yes. Who
told me on television that she had a relationship with John and then one with Sam, but never concurrently.
That's right.
Is that your knowledge, too?
That's exactly what we understand. And we really just touch on her relationship as it related to the relationship between Sam and Jack Kennedy.
Okay, and the Marilyn Monroe part of this is what? How did Sam get involved with her?
Well, I think to understand what happened to Marilyn Monroe, and she really perhaps is the greatest victim in the whole book. I think all of society has been the victim of the questionable activities between our government and organized crime. But Marilyn Monroe was someone who, through the early days of Hollywood, became associated with Johnny Roselli and Joe Schenck, who had specific ties to Chicago. Subsequently, as she became more famous, the CIA had an opportunity to use her to compromise world leaders. That's been documented in relation to President Sukarno of Indonesia. And as a result, she became an individual who knew a great deal about not only the CIA, but the mob, and eventually became very close to not only Jack Kennedy, but Robert Kennedy.
As lovers?
Yes, yes.
Did Sam hate John Kennedy, or did he hate Bobby Kennedy through to John?
Well, the initial relationship was strictly business, but he began to hate Jack for obviously not coming through on his promise, but he really held a vendetta for Bobby Kennedy.
Your knowledge, what's the story of Marilyn Monroe's death?
Marilyn Monroe did not die as a result of suicide. She was murdered by assassins directed by Sam Giancana as a result of a contract that was placed by the CIA. The CIA was threatened with what Marilyn Monroe might discuss when she made the statement about blowing the lid off the whole damn thing. CIA was obviously threatened and issued the contract.
You know that?
Yes. And
how was she killed?
She was killed as a result of a suppository that was administered, a doctored Nembutal suppository that contained chloral hydrates and barbiturates. It obviously dissolved and then subsequently went right into her bloodstream, and it just became a matter of time before she died.
So the medical examiner could have missed that?
Well, it was discussed in terms of her ingestion of pills, but they found very little residue, and obviously if that had occurred or the assassins used that method, they may have bruised her face, she may have vomited. So the suppository was really the perfect way of murdering Marilyn Monroe. And this was a suppository that was doctored by an individual, University of Illinois chemist, who also helped in providing lethal aids to try to assassinate Fidel Castro. So that relationship existed for a period of time.
Wow. Our guest is Sam Giancana. He and his father, Chuck, have co-written Double Cross, the explosive inside story of the mobster who controlled America. We'll talk about the killing of JFK. We'll go to your phone calls. The book is published by Warner Books. It'll be number 6 on the New York Times list this Sunday.
And now, live from Washington, D.C., here's Larry.
With Sam Giancana, the nephew and the godson of the mob boss, Sam Giancana. Before we take our first call, the JFK killing. What, if any, was your uncle involved?
In the book, we delineate very specifically of the Chicago outfit, specifically Sam Giancana's role in collaboration with the CIA to eliminate Jack Kennedy. Specifically, Sam Giancana provided several marksmen that worked in collaboration with the CIA.
In order to get Bobby off his back?
Well, at that time, Bobby was really a secondary motivation. The CIA was in a position where their life was really being threatened. Their existence was being threatened as a result of Jack Kennedy's desire to dismantle that organization. You had the whole activity related to the military intelligence and the Vietnam issue bearing down on their existence, the opportunity to make money, obviously. And then you had the heavy influence and involvement of Bobby Kennedy going after organized crime. Those factors combined for quite a foe.
We're going to start to go to your phone calls for Sam Giancana, the book Double Cross, Niagara Falls. Hello.
Before I ask my question, you say your name Giancana, and everybody else says it Giancana. Which is right?
Well, actually, Giancana is I think phonetically the way it should be pronounced, but being out of Chicago, I have that hard kind of A sound, so it's Giancana.
Oh, okay. I want to know about Phyllis McGuire. What do you know that she knew about Sam Giancana's business? I think she knew a hell of a lot more with electronic bulletproof shutters on her house.
Well, that's a very interesting observation. It's quite incredible that someone has been able to amass that kind of wealth and obviously employs that kind of security. Sam Giancana considered Phyllis McGuire very highly, and she was at our home several times. It was not a secret that Sam put many of his investments in other people's names, basically all of his investments, and it was also no secret that he had oil wells, that he had a lot of different property, and certainly somebody wound up with those investments.
Were you a recipient in the will?
No.
Tucson, hello.
Yes, as depicted in the movie Goodfellas, how many times did your family ever go after somebody because of personal anger after the fact?
Well, I think we have to differentiate between what happened in Goodfellas and in New York versus Chicago. Chicago was a really quite a unified organization, and there wasn't a lot of infighting. There was the boss and his organization, and everyone seemed to stay in line. As far as what I know in terms of vendettas and taking people out, I was really kind of divorced of that life. There were many people who lost their life throughout Chicago.
Redwood City, California. Hello.
Hi, yeah. I'm very interested in your program tonight. I'm hearing a lot of good things for a change about what's happening because I'm hearing more of the truth, I think.
Truth never hurts.
That's right.
May hurt, but it's always better.
Well, I know it's bad and I know it hurts, but I mean, it's good that the truth is coming out, and I appreciate this, and I'm wondering, is this person that we're talking about the same one that they might have referred to in another book in Kingfish Mafia?
Mafia Kingfish referred to Carlos Marcello, who was the boss of the New Orleans mob. He has been implicated in various activities, and we discuss him to a degree in Double Cross because he did have an involvement with a lot of smuggling and so forth.
Okay, we're going to pause for news headlines. A word from your local stations. We'll be back. Half hour to go with Sam Giancana. The book Double Cross, the godson and the brother of mob boss Sam Giancana with the explosive inside story of the mobster who controlled America. It takes you inside the CIA. Some thoughts, Sam Giancana on women, for example. Sam said, women are like shoes. Wear them out, throw them away. It's nice if they're the best-looking shoes you can buy, but they're still shoes any way you cut it. They're disposable. Sam was an interesting guy. The book is Double Cross. Tomorrow night, we'll meet Leon Day, one of the stars of the old-time Negro baseball. He may go into the Hall of Fame in March. And the brilliant former center of the Chicago Blackhawks, Stan Mikita. This is the Larry King Show. We will pause for news headlines, a word from your local stations, back with more calls. For Sam Giancana, I'm Larry King, and this is the Mutual Broadcasting System.
The Larry King Show is taking your calls now at 703-685-2177. That's 703-685-2177. Let the connection ring. We'll answer when it's your turn. And now, live from Washington, D.C., here's Larry.
By the way, this Sunday night, instead of the Best of King, there'll be a special edition of the Larry King Show that will feature Chris Matthews and David Gergen with a preview of Super Tuesday. Our guest is Sam Giancana. He and his father, Chuck, are the authors of Double Cross, Austin, Texas. Hello.
Yes. Hi, Larry, and hi, Mr. Giancana. I'm just wondering, the whole world's been wondering also what really happened with Marilyn Dye. And are you now revealing what they said on that documentary where someday the whole world will really find out what happened to Marilyn? And where really do you get your facts?
Well, if you're referring, I think, to the hard copy show that aired a couple weeks ago, that was actually, that scenario was from our book, Double Cross. And I think in that show you had several experts, one specifically, Anthony Summers, who felt that what we've outlined is more than likely what has occurred. Our facts really come from a source very close to Sam Giancana, one of his closest assassins, Chucky Nicoletti. And he was a man who grew up with my father, was not someone who was a stranger, and was the kind of information you can count on.
When you saw movies like The Godfather, how'd you react?
Well, I enjoyed it. My father felt like he was at home. I mean, the characters came to life. It felt real.
To New Haven, hello.
Sam?
Yes.
I bought your book and read it, but there's a couple of things I don't understand. Why did they practically kidnap him from Mexico?
Well, that's a really interesting point you bring up, because Sam was basically living in Mexico in the early 70s, and suddenly he was deported. We speculate in our epilogue that the CIA wanted him a little closer to home and wanted him back in the United States. Certainly the FBI didn't have any knowledge. Matter of fact, they were caught by surprise when he entered San Antonio, Texas.
Philadelphia with Sam Giancana. Hello.
What was his connection with Frank Sinatra, and to whom did he leave most of his money?
Okay, I think his relationship with Frank Sinatra has been documented over the years. It was a close relationship that went back to the 30s and 40s, culminated even in the co-ownership of the Calneva in Lake Tahoe. Sam Giancana often had him over for dinner and met him and various other celebrities for dinner in Chicago, and even Irv Kupson had said, who was a columnist in Chicago, that when Frank Sinatra came into Chicago, he paid tribute to Sam Giancana. So that relationship goes a long way. As far as the inheritance and what he left his money, I think he left some of his holdings to his daughters, and that's as far as I know.
No gift to your father?
No.
Silver Spring, Maryland. Hello.
Yes, hi, Larry. I had two quick questions. Number one, were you able to uncover information as to how Oswald was manipulated through this whole thing? And number two, do you have any information regarding the French connection to the assassination? Did Mr. Giancana contract with certain people in France to do this?
Well, I think we go into some very specifics in terms of the assassination, and I think in order to get a good understanding, you have to look at the players. Certainly the CIA was involved. They brought some of their own men. Likewise, Sam Giancana brought several of his own men. There were other participants, specifically through Carlos Marcello and Santos Traficante, who brought men in. Who they eventually contracted with, whether it was someone within their own organization, whether they were Cuban exiles, whether they were a French connection, it's another story.
New York City, hello.
Hi, the way you see it, who was Jack Ruby in this?
Well, Jack Ruby places Chicago at the very center of the assassination. Jack Ruby was sent to Dallas in 1947. He reported through Lenny Patrick and Dave Yaris, who in turn reported to Sam Giancana. And when Jack Ruby pulled the trigger and killed Lee Harvey Oswald, that placed Chicago right in the center of the action.
But he never said anything other than Jack Ruby never said anything to get himself off.
No. I think at the time he thought he was going to be a real hero, but he did a job that he had to do. Because Oswald was captured, which was not the original plan laid out, it fell to Jack Ruby as the representative of the Chicago outfit to silence him.
Our guest is Sam Giancana. The book is Double Cross, Logan Sport, Indiana. Hello.
I have two questions. The first question is, to your knowledge, did the President, Kennedy, ever tell J. Edgar Hoover not to investigate your uncle? And number two, what were the nature of the things that the FBI was trying to find out about your uncle? And number three, I'm wondering why Lee Harvey Oswald shot General Walker 6 weeks before he shot the President.
Attempted to shoot.
Attempted.
Okay.
Well, certainly in regards to Lee Harvey Oswald, I really don't know what the circumstances surrounding that event. As far as the FBI is concerned, they really didn't take an active role in pursuing organized crime until the Appalachian, New York raid in 1957. At that time, J. Edgar Hoover was caught with his pants down and really had to take an active role in pursuing organized crime. And they were trying to obviously put as many people behind bars as possible. And what really transpired is there was initiated the Top Hoodlum program, in which Sam Giancana was #1 on Bobby Kennedy's list. And they were looking to find anything they could to put him behind bars.
Sam Giancana is our guest, and we move to Roanoke. The book is Double Cross.
Yes, sir. I'm curious if there was a contract out on Fidel Castro, and if so, why was it not successful?
Well, I think there was a contract put out on Fidel Castro, and that's the first time the American public really became aware of this relationship between the CIA and organized crime, specifically the relationship with Sam Giancana. And that was a relationship that extended far back into the 50s, as well as continued into the 60s and may even be continuing nowadays. But the attempt was not successful because they didn't have the kind of people on the local scene that could administer the kinds of poison or get close enough to Castro to put him away.
Book is fascinating. Number 6 on the New York Times list this Sunday, Double Cross by Sam and Chuck Giancana. Sam is the godson and nephew of the late Sam Giancana. Chuck is the brother.
You're listening to The Larry King Show, live from Washington, D.C. Here again, Larry King.
With Sam Giancana, St. Louis. Hello.
Hello, Sam. It's really interesting for me to hear you on the show tonight because I have a similar situation to yours in that I grew up in St. Louis and I have a relative who was in the same business that your Uncle Sam was. Is a legend in St. Louis. I'm sure he's not nationally popular like your uncle. But yeah, my situation is similar in that my father was in his employment of this person, just as your father was employed by Sam. My question is, do you get a lot of flack from your family? My father, although not similarly to your father, was not directly involved in a lot of the business, but was extremely loyal. And I'm just curious, he would be very upset if I were to do what you're doing. And I'm curious to know, how did your family react?
Well, for the last 23 years, we've lived under another name. We legally changed our name in 1969 to escape Sam Giancana's legacy and the stigma associated with his name. A lot of the family didn't like that, and specifically Sam Giancana didn't like it. He was living in Mexico at the time. There comes a point where you can't be concerned about what your family's going to say. You have to do with what you have to do, and we had information that we thought was important, and we want the experts to judge it and determine its validity, and we'll let it rest with that.
Of course, though, you've blown that cover now with television appearances and the like. The people in the way you live are going to know your real name.
That's certainly a possibility, and I'm not going to deny the fact, but we're not going to change our name.
Rochester, New York. Hello.
Good evening, Larry and Sam. I'm enjoying your show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What can the average person or the public do to help move the resolution and investigation of the assassination forward?
Well, I think what's transpired is exactly what has to continue to happen, and that's citizen involvement in the kind of programs that spotlight some of the activities. I mean, certainly the more the public wants to know about these various activities, the more pressure it bears on government. It's going to help out. I question what we're really going to find out with this new level of openness from the CIA. I don't really think that the Fox is going to tell all the stories about what he's done in the hen house. So I really question what will happen there. But it's important. We need to learn that we can't be apathetic. We have to be an active participant.
Mobile, Alabama, for Sam Giancana. Hello.
Yes, hello, Larry. Mr. Giancana, what information do you have as to whether or not Lee Harvey Oswald was maybe actually innocent?
Well, there's been a lot written about Lee Harvey Oswald in terms of his connection to a possible CIA relationship. We specifically say that he was a CIA operative. Sam Giancana mentioned that fact, and that he was set up as a patsy. He was really never even to shoot. What was going to happen was the CIA was going to plant enough propaganda that would make him look like the criminal, and the idea was that along with two other CIA individuals, they were going to flee the scene of the crime, eventually shoot and kill Lee Harvey Oswald in the name of self-defense. Both of these other individuals were Dallas law enforcement people, would bring him back to Dallas, pin the crime on Lee Harvey Oswald, who was now deceased, and the whole matter would be settled. But unfortunately for them, Lee Harvey Oswald got concerned. J.D. Tippit wavered, and J.D. Tippit was killed.
Washington, D.C. Hello.
Yeah, I've heard everything, about the conspiracy and the CIA, but what about my grandfather, Peterson? He was the assistant attorney general under JFK.
He was.
And so, did you know anything about him? Did he have anything to do with?
Did he?
That name doesn't ring a bell, and I never heard it mentioned.
Sorry. Martin, Tennessee. Hello. Martin, Tennessee. Hello.
Yes, Larry. Long-time listener, first-time call.
Thank you.
Terrific.
One question for him. was there anybody in the grassy knoll?
Well, it certainly seems like a lot of people feel that there's been some smoke emanating from that source. We specifically do not mention the grassy knoll because my uncle did not mention that location. And what we tried to do in Double Cross is provide information that was directly from my uncle and not get into a lot of the other speculative.
Los Angeles, hello.
Hi. As you know, Sam, a lot of your relatives have come out blasting this book. That they've been portraying Chuck as something of an imbecile, especially Sam's daughter, who's written a book on her life with her dad. My question is, why, since especially with Sam's daughter's case, they wouldn't have any financial gain to be made of this? Why have they come out questioning the validity of the book? And what's your reaction to that? Thank you.
Well, it's certainly unfortunate that this one particular individual has sought a personal attack. His daughter has resulted in personal attacks rather than really looking at the information. And I'm really not concerned about what our family thinks about the information because we know where the information comes from, and ultimately the experts are going to be the ones to determine its accuracy.
It'll be number 6 this Sunday, New York Times bestseller list, Sam Giancana Double Cross.
You're listening to The Larry King Show, live from Washington, D.C. Here again, Larry King.
Silver Spring with Sam Giancana. Hello.
Yes, hello?
Hi.
Hello.
I'd like to know, there were, according to an author by the name of Maher, I think it's Bill Maher, his book, he said there were like over 100 co-conspirators or witnesses that mysteriously died, committed suicide, or were murdered, like Dorothy Kilgallen, who threatened to blow the lid off the thing in the 60s. Is there any...
Well, certainly when you look at all of the individuals who have had either direct or indirect knowledge, the coincidence and the probability is so astronomical that it really leads you to wonder what was going on.
Yes, yeah. I would say Toronto, hello.
Yes, I'd like to ask a quick question. From what I understand of the scenario in the title Double Cross, Kennedy's father had a stroke apparently. I wonder if you can confirm this, that it was because he heard the news of the fact that RFK was going to continue with his prosecutions in spite of the fact that Giancana had sent a message through Sinatra and Lawford, I believe, that that what's happening here, we contributed, in other words, West Virginia, the election night 1960. Am I getting a picture that it's because of the mob did favors for Kennedy, such as those, and then Giancana, then it's a double cross that the mafia wouldn't tolerate that John Kennedy had allowed his brother to wage this horrendous war against them, as they would see it. I just wonder, in light of the fact that back in '57, RFK on the Senate Council had interrogated Giancana, didn't Giancana fear that in '60 that RFK being a major figure with the Kennedys might have spelled trouble? Like, how wasn't it an intricate? Can you go into some of that intricate webbing there with Lawford and how the messages were passed and so on?
Well, certainly when Jack Kennedy established his brother Bobby Kennedy as Attorney General, that was the moment in time when everyone realized this was another double cross. Either Bobby Kennedy was going to lay down and be easy on organized crime, or he was going to go after him with the full force of the Justice Department. And obviously Bobby Kennedy went after him full speed ahead. And so that relationship changed over the years. The relationship with Joseph Kennedy was established years ago in the 20s when he came into Chicago and met with various individuals like Diamond Joe Esposito, and subsequently into the 50s when he met with organized crime people, specifically Sam in Nevada. And then in the late 50s when the promise was extracted that for taking the contract off of Joe Kennedy, that his brother, his son, would have the ear and the involvement with Sam.
Tucson, hello.
This is John. Tucson, 1-602-881-3656. I've had a heart attack too in late August 1990.
You have a question of Sam?
What?
Okay. Centerville, Virginia. Hello.
Yes, two quick questions for you guests. As far as you know, was there specifically any complicity on the part of either the FBI or Lyndon Johnson in knowing in advance and not doing anything to stop the assassination?
My uncle, Sam Giancana, said to my father that he had met with both Lyndon Johnson and Nixon prior to the assassination, and that the plans went right up to the top of the CIA. Certainly, Lyndon Johnson had a great deal to gain. Likewise, Richard Nixon was stung by the defeat in the 1960 election.
Miami, hello.
Hi, two unrelated questions. One, have any of the theorists on the assassination used any of your material? And two, what about you? How have you spent your life? What work do you do?
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly the information we've brought to light is fairly new. But it is important to note that a lot of the information in our book has been in the public domain, has been historically documented. And what we've really tried to do is put the pieces of the puzzle together and show the thread that existed for many years. And what additional information we've brought forth is several unique conversations which help support the activities that went on. And I think then you get a better understanding of what was happening.
Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. The book, Oklahoma. Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi.
I have a guest suggestion and a question.
A question for the guest. Go ahead.
Okay, question for the guest. Was E. Howard Hunt of the CIA involved?
My uncle did not mention him, nor did anyone else that my father spoke of.
How old was your uncle when he died?
He was approximately 60-something.
Saltville,
68.
Virginia. Hello.
Yes, I was wondering about during the Kennedy assassination, the films I have seen, there is obviously a facial shot from the front. Is there anybody that disputed that back then? About he was, his head flew backwards.
There's been a lot of theories and a lot of analysis with that shot, and we don't go into that because the people my father spoke with did not give any specific detail about the grassy knoll. We knew where a couple shooters were placed, and we named those individuals and locations.
Albuquerque, hello.
Yes, if indeed a suppository was used, would it not been under forcible conditions, and would that have not resulted in bruised tissue?
Well, I think the autopsy report of Marilyn Monroe does demonstrate that there was if I'm not mistaken, a bluish irritation in her colon, and which leads to that theory of suppository injection. But at the same time, I think that she was sedated prior when Bobby Kennedy and another individual came in, so she wasn't in a position to struggle.
When do you go back to your normal life?
Well, it's going to be a question of when we get through all this. Certainly, we've got a job to do, and we'll go out and talk to people as long as they're interested.
And you're still in concept with doing another one, maybe?
Well, there's an opportunity for us to write some additional materials, but
certainly
not nonfiction. Not nonfiction. Maybe in the fiction area.
Thanks, Sam. Good luck.
Thank you for having me.
Sam Giancana, great guy, and he and his father Chuck have co-written Double Cross.